Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Anthony Morneau. A recent NMSU study found that employment and construction activities at the Santa Teresa port of entry and industrial parks in 2020 led to over 3,200 direct jobs and over 5,800 jobs overall. Here to share more about business at the border is Jerry Pacheco. He is president of the Border Industrial Association and executive director of the International Business Accelerator. Mr. Pacheco also writes the syndicated column Business Across the Border for the Albuquerque Journal. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us again on the program.
Good to see you, Anthony. Thank you.
I want to talk with you about the study. This study was done by the Arrowhead Center and the Center for Border Economic Development, CBED, at New Mexico State University. The Border Industrial Association served as a collaborative partner with this study. You were quoted by NMSU in a press release saying that this is the first detailed, comprehensive study of the Santa Teresa Borderplex. Share with us what makes this study such a reliable source of data for economic development in our region.
Well, we have been wanting to do this type of a study forever, and I'm glad that the Center for Border Economic Development and Arrowhead got together and did this. It took a couple of months to get everything together, but it's the first notable economic impact report on what New Mexico's border region, particularly Santa Teresa, is doing for the state's economy. I've always said that the border offers one of the best chances for New Mexico to diversify its economy, and this report pretty much says that. And to give you an idea, we kind of copycatted the Spaceport America. They did their own economic study, and since they were founded 15 years ago or so, they have contributed, they estimate, about $1 billion to the state's economy. Well, just in 2020 alone, the Santa Teresa industrial base contributed $1.1 billion, and that's what we're doing about a year to New Mexico's economy.
I mean, you bring up a point. There's a lot of criticism that New Mexico doesn't have enough private sector jobs available for folks in the area, good paying jobs. When you hear that from folks, what do you say to them about what's happening at the border?
In fact, we can't get enough people to work down here, and they're very good paying jobs with benefits. One of the issues is that we're kind of a little island unto ourselves down here. Obviously, the big population base is in the Albuquerque-Santa Fe corridor, and we're on a different media market. So it's always a struggle to let people know what's going on and the good things that are going on at the border. We have literally billions of dollars invested here by foreign and U.S. companies that are coming here and taking advantage of all the advantages and the benefits that the border can offer.
Now, how has that job creation contributed to the state's tax revenue in our region here?
Well, it's estimated, and it's a split between federal and state taxes, but about a $90 million tax base on an annual basis, which is incredible. Just an incredible figure. This is really important for our efforts up in Santa Fe during the legislative session, because I've always gotten the question when I'm testifying in front of legislative committees, well, how much do you mean to the New Mexico economy? And it's always very hard to answer that. But when you have skilled economists with their algorithms and we're feeding them primary information, this is just a great thing to have in your hand when we go up there and we vie for capital outlay for our roads or for the water system or what have you. So it's invaluable.
Okay, now you mentioned about going to Santa Fe, talking with lawmakers, policymakers who could really make a difference on the future of what you're doing down there. What do you think are some of the major opportunities you have right now with the industrial parks there in Santa Teresa?
We have a major opportunity as the car industry, the auto industry goes electric. We can get pieces of that industry. Value-added agriculture is another area. We established about 10 years ago an overweight zone in which Mexican trucks that loaded 96,000 pounds can cross into our industrial base. We have concrete roads, we have good police force out here, and that overweight zone is a tool that we're using to get companies. In fact, at the beginning of the year, we just recruited 2 Mexican produce importers that are using that overweight zone. So there's a lot of opportunities in auto value added agriculture, and we're big right now in computer electronics here. We've got Foxconn on the other side of the border. We also have CommScope here in the Santa Teresa Airport Park.
Okay, you've already mentioned that the industrial park there at Santa Teresa helps create $1.1 billion in total output. The report also stated $411 million in value-added production. We hear this term used a lot by professionals working in economic development. For our audience members who may not be familiar with this term, what can you tell our audience about what exactly value-added production means?
That means that we're not just moving stuff that's already made around. You're bringing components in here, you're bringing raw materials, and you're making something out of it. That's what the value-added production aspect is, which we probably, I'm gonna hazard a guess, we have to be the largest area of that type in the entire state of New Mexico. We've got big operations here, making everything from copper wire to metal fabrication, plastic injection, cardboard boxes. It's all the stuff that you and I have been ordering through Amazon during the pandemic.
COVID-19 has impacted our economy in so many different ways. Obviously, it impacted the border region there. Can you kind of explain to us what exactly happened there so far? What has happened there so far during the pandemic with COVID-19 presenting many challenges?
Well, when GM shut down their factories in North America, we did have 2 companies related to the automotive industry. And we have a big automotive base here in Santa Teresa. They shut down for 60 days, but virtually every other company kept plowing on through the pandemic because, again, we're making stuff that everybody uses. I mean, you have to have copper wire going into electronics. You've got electronic components. And it all comes in a box. And we've got 2 corrugators that are making cardboard here for packaging materials. So compared to the rest of the state, and I had people tell me from other parts of the state, you guys seem to be the only area in the state that really didn't take a major hit during the pandemic, and it's only getting better. If you look at our exports, and Santa Teresa is right now responsible for about 60% of New Mexico's exports to the world, entire exports. Most of that being Mexico, because we are tied in so much to exports to Mexico. But from January through August, we are up 57% in our exports to the world. Mexico 17%, and China is a whopping 168%. So we're going to have a record year in exports, and that's a bellwether. It's an indicator of how well this industrial base is doing, since we account so much for so much of the state's exports.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of exciting opportunities for companies that have already invested there in Santa Teresa. What about companies that could potentially be arriving there? What are some areas and industries that you think the industrial park would be a great fit for?
Anything that's tied to Mexico, obviously. And the other big effort, to answer your question a different way, there's a big opportunity in Asia right now. We've recruited in the last 2 years, and 2 during the pandemic, by the way. Last year, at the heart of the pandemic, 2020, we recruited 3 Taiwanese companies. And we look at Asia as our happy hunting ground. A lot of companies are caught between the United States and China on this big trade war, and they're getting hit with 30 to 35% tariffs. So that's one factor. The other factor is the disruption in supply chains. Companies are going to spend more money to hedge their bets to have an operation or have multiple operations in different parts of the world, so that they don't get shut down or their customers aren't on their backs for supply. And we're starting to see that now. In fact, industrial warehouse space is at a premium down at the border, because everybody is trying to get as much inventory stored as possible, and they're renting extra space, even though that adds cost to their operations. And that's occurring right now also.
You mentioned supply chains. That's been in the news lately. A lot of folks are concerned about the holidays and potential delays with items they may be ordering online. I know you have wrote in your column about this issue. Can you give us some perspective on what are the major causes of shipping delays with the supply chain?
There's a myriad of factors. One is that we're buying like crazy. I mean, everybody's trying to buy themselves out of the pandemic and get a little joy out of that. So that's causing a lot of shortages. You have container ships. About a month ago, when I wrote that column that you mentioned, there were 70 container ships just floating in the ocean off of Long Beach and Los Angeles, waiting to get undocked. 7 days to 10 days to get to the docks. That's a huge factor. There's just not enough longshoremen. The trains can only haul so much out of those ports of entry. They're literally trying to shove stuff in warehousing to get it off the ships. But then you have to consider the largest ships. Ships are measured in 20-foot equivalent units, and you can tell the size of a ship by how many 20-foot containers hypothetically that it could carry. The biggest ships are going to be delivered next year at 24,000 20-foot container units. So the ships are getting bigger. So as they get bigger, they take forever to get unloaded. And that's really disrupting the system in Long Beach and LA, where they're going 24/7 now. They're going 24/7 to try to accommodate the traffic. And they're moving stuff off the ships and trying to store it in places like Utah. We're seeing a lot of stuff come through here in Santa Teresa also. It's just an amazing thing that I've never seen in 30 years of my career, these shortages and these supply chain disruptions. But I will always self-reflect and say, we should have seen this coming. 10 years ago, when the tsunami hit Japan, if you recall what happened to the auto industry, when some Japanese suppliers got wiped out and it sent disruptions through the chain, we should have seen this. We should have prepared for this. But I see companies as having being nickel smart and dollar dumb in terms of this. And I think that's going to change going forward.
Now, you mentioned some companies are investing themselves in shipping and in ships that can carry supplies as well. Do you think that this is going to be happening more in the future?
The big companies can do that. Walmart can do that. Home Depot can do that, and they're doing that. It's a reverse trend in terms of what we've seen during the past 30 years. Companies outsource their logistics. They don't do their own logistics anymore. But this is a trend to reverse all that, because Walmart and Home Depot, as I mentioned, they've leased and commandeered their own ships to guarantee or better guarantee the timing of their shipments. So they don't have, they're not at the mercy of the shortages and the congestion at the ports of entry. You're going to see bigger companies do that. What I'm worried about is the smaller companies don't really have the muscle to be able to do something like that. So everybody's going to be jockeying to book space on container ships, particularly coming from Asia.
So from what you're saying right there, it's the smaller companies or the locally owned companies that could be really hurting from this supply chain, and it could make big corporations even more powerful. Is that what you're saying?
It could. You're seeing weird things. I mean, I was talking to a welder the other day, kind of a sculptor, and he's having trouble getting particular metals for his craft there. In the park here, it's frustrating because here we have all of this beautiful development going on. We want to build some more space to have it ready for companies to come in, but to get steel, to get even PVC pipe is a challenge. And I think that's going to disrupt our ability to react quickly to the market because of those supply chain shortages.
Okay, now, as we tape this interview, Congress is having trouble coming to an agreement on an infrastructure bill. What do you think federal lawmakers need to take a look at when it comes to an infrastructure bill, a potential infrastructure bill, and how could it help alleviate this problem?
Well, I mean, it's obvious. We have aging infrastructure, particularly along the border in our ports of entry here, our land ports of entry, and I'll use Santa Teresa Port of Entry. We are now 6th on the list of the most important ports of entry on the U.S.-Mexico border in terms of value added and volume. Our little tiny little port that I'm worried is going to reach a point where we cannot push any more traffic through the port of entry. So we need to revamp that completely. And we're asking for design monies to get a redesign of the port of entry. Then we're probably talking 150 million to 170 million to reconstruct the port. But those infrastructure monies, and what Congress needs to realize is that the bickering, the delays, the politicking is hurting the U.S. economy. Because if we had that port of entry modernized, we're going to trade a lot more with Mexico. We're going to attract more companies. We're going to create good jobs. And that goes to the bottom line. It goes to the tax base. So I struggle when I see all the stuff going on in Washington, and we're just waiting here for some agreement to be reached so we can put that money to use.
Speaking of infrastructure, there's been some concern about infrastructure in the southern part of the county as we've had these big job announcements happening, not only in the Santa Teresa Industrial Park, but also outside in surrounding communities. Obviously, the southern part of Doña Ana County has faced flooding and has some challenges there, and there's always the challenge of water in the region. So as far as addressing those issues locally, what do you think some state lawmakers and policymakers can do to possibly help this situation and further develop the economy here in the southern part of Doña Ana County?
I always say our motto down here is to keep infrastructure ahead of development. The day the water doesn't come out of your faucet is the day you don't recruit companies. So you've got to invest. And one of the most promising areas in the entire state of New Mexico is New Mexico's border region. This is the best place to diversify the economy. We've got to get away from the traditional three, I'll call them. That's petroleum, that's government spending, and that's tourism. Those are all great parts of our economy, but we've got to diversify because they're very cyclical in the way they go up and down. What we're establishing at the border is an industrial base where companies come here, they spend a lot of money to build buildings, they invest millions of dollars, and then they hire a couple of hundred people that go on the payroll. That's economic development, and we need to invest in the border area.
Now, when companies make that investment, I mean, there's got to be like the challenge of ensuring that no matter what happens with our world, and we're now dealing with climate change impacting so many things, what are some things that lawmakers can do to stay ahead with infrastructure so that you can ensure that things can continue to grow there?
Well, I mean, the federal funding is going to be tremendous, I think, for New Mexico. But we always seem to in this state, and maybe it's because we're not as economically developed as other states. We seem to fight over, funding for here, the Albuquerque area, this and that. The border area is actually paying for its, ticket down here by what we're doing in job creation. As you mentioned, the New Mexico State University report said, $1.1 billion added to the economy here. We've got to work on projects, and you brought up water. Down here at the border, we're sitting on a huge lake of brackish water. And we're actually working with Elephant Butte Irrigation District and NMSU to test some new portable desalination equipment. We've been working with them a couple of years to get this project jump-started. If we can prove the technology works and we can get everything set up, we literally could go to the state and federal governments, maybe the Border Environmental Cooperation Commission and the North American Development Bank, and ask for funding. Setting up a desal plant here at the border would really add to years of growth and viable growth. So we're not depleting the limited water we have in New Mexico.
Now, I want to get back to the report. You just brought it up. Now, it also highlighted the growth that is happening there in the last 10 years. Can you give us an idea of just what we're looking at in terms of growth in companies and infrastructure?
Well, we've recruited 3 Taiwanese companies in the last 2 years, a PPE company last year, 2 produce companies this year. We have a recycling company doing a 120,000 square foot building. We just announced that we had a 315,000 square foot speculative building. That's a building you build without having clients and you go out and try to find them. We just announced a couple of months ago 2 companies, Tecma, which is a big value-added producer in Mexico. It's a maquila, a contract manufacturer, and Ergomotion, which is an adjustable bed company. They've divvied up that 315,000 square foot company. It's just incredible. If you look at New Mexico's exports, and again, that's a reflection of our industrial base since we tend to dominate the state's exports. If you go back 10 years, New Mexico leads the nation in export growth percentage, and it's good to be number one in a good category, not all the bad stuff. But that's a reflection of what's going on down here. It's been a beautiful run over the last 10 years.
With what's happening at the border right now, what are your concerns moving forward? Obviously, we're still in the pandemic. There has been the news of the border opening up this month to citizens from Mexico who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. How do you see this playing a role in affecting the economy there?
It's gonna be a big effect because there is so much pent-up demand in Mexico for Mexicans that have not been allowed or who were deemed non-essential that were not allowed to travel to the United States. You're going to see a wave break loose of people coming in and shopping, which is ironic because it scares me also because the other day I had somebody complain that they couldn't find Fritos in the store, and that's because of the supply chain disruption. I mean, when do you not find a popular potato chip? But you're going to see the economies of places like El Paso, Las Cruces, cities all along the border, Sunland Park. It's gonna be a shot in the arm. No pun intended for COVID or what have you, but it's going to be an economic shot in the arm. But I am very, very worried that extra demand is going to even exacerbate even more the supply chain issues we have.
Okay, now as we're talking, I mean, there's so much that we don't know, especially with the pandemic. Companies in your area, in the border region, have also had some challenges. We've seen some companies try to learn more about if they should try to implement a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Some big national companies have done that. Are any of the companies there facing a challenge with that issue? Should the pandemic worsen in our region?
Yeah, I mean, every company you go into here has a pretty stiff protocol. I mean, temperature checks, sanitizer, mask wearing, as best as you can in a production plant, separate people. Some firms have gone as far as taking a 2-shift operation and making it 3 shifts. So that way they spread the people, apart from each other. It's going to be an issue. Reopening the border on November 8th is going to be an issue when you consider that 15 to 20% of the retail sales in El Paso, Texas, are to Mexican nationals. I mean, we're going to have this wave coming over. We have to protect ourselves. Obviously, vaccinations seem to be the key to that, and wearing your mask in a public place. But all of us down here at the border, I've traveled during the pandemic, and it seems like we're very good about that kind of stuff. The PPE, the shots. I mean, I read a report the other day that El Paso had achieved herd immunity because of the number of people that gotten vaccinated, or unfortunately the ones that have antibodies because they developed COVID. But I'm very proud of our region. We've been very good during the pandemic.
I mean, there's still some challenges in New Mexico, though, because the state is still dealing with crisis standards of care at hospitals that have been implemented by the Department of Health. There is some hope with boosters coming out, though, right now, and maybe that can help alleviate some of the challenges. But so far with your area, I mean, you mentioned you're hopeful, but I mean, what are the things that you see that really give you hope?
Well, I see the production. I mean, just by the exports going up, it's a reflection of what's going on here. I still see, even though that there's herd immunity in El Paso, and I shop in El Paso because I'm right next door here. You see people that probably don't have to masking up going into a store. taking precautions. And that really encourages me that it's going to get better. I do believe in science, and I think most of our companies here do also. And they have so much at risk, because if they have an outbreak in their company, it shuts down production. I mean, first of all, is the employee's health, but then it's tough enough now working with less people because everybody's struggling to find employees. You do not want to have, under any circumstances, an outbreak in your plant. So everybody down here is very, very cautious.
Okay, we just have about a minute left, so I have a quick question for you. If a member of the Legislative Finance Committee, or perhaps the governor of New Mexico, or a federal lawmaker comes to Santa Teresa, what is the first thing they're going to notice about your industrial park there?
All the construction. The first thing you notice, probably the most popular project, and I find it ironic, is we're getting a Love's truck stop right outside my office here. And so I'm so proud of all the new construction, all the new companies, and everybody's, yeah, that's great. But every employee here is praying for that truck stop to open so they can get chips, soda, pizza, and what have you. So the first thing you'll notice is the amount of construction. I don't think there's this amount of industrial construction in the rest of the state combined.
Jerry Pacheco is president of the Border Industrial Association. He is also executive director of the International Business Accelerator and pens the column Business Across the Border for the Albuquerque Journal. Jerry, it's always great talking with you. Thank you for joining us for the program.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me. You take care.
And we want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Anthony Murnau. We'll see you next time.